in the small, sunburnt village of Imbali, where the dusty winds carried the scent of dry earth and distant fires. A little girl named Amina sat beneath the wide arms of an old baobab tree beside her schoolyard. It was late afternoon, and the world was painted gold by the dying sun. The laughter of other children had already faded into echoes as one by one they were fetched by their parents, mothers balancing baskets on their heads, fathers calling out cheerfully as they led their little ones home. But Amina remained behind, her small brown hands clutching the strap of her worn school satchel, her bare feet covered in red dust. The bell had rung long ago, yet no one came for her. Her teacher, tired from the day's lessons, had locked the wooden school gate without looking back, assuming all children had gone. The hum of life around her began to fade, the distant bleating of goats, the cries of market vendors, the laughter of older boys playing with a ragged football. Soon, only the whisper of the evening breeze and the rhythmic chirp of cicadas remained. The golden sky began to darken, slowly bleeding into shades of purple and deep orange, and Amina realized with a small, fearful heart that she had been forgotten again. Her mother had probably gone to the market to gossip, as always. Her father likely drinking palm wine with friends under the mango tree near the river. They often forgot about her, but never for this long. She pressed her knees to her chest and stared at the road leading home, a long ribbon of red soil stretching into the fading light. The world seemed suddenly too big, too quiet, too empty for such a small girl. When the sun finally sank behind the hills, the first stars began to appear like tiny, watchful eyes in the sky. Then came the drumming, faint, deep, and distant, the sound of celebration from the harvest dance. It echoed through the fields, steady as a heartbeat. For a moment, Amina almost smiled. Her grandmother used to say that the sound of drums was how the earth spoke to the heavens. But then she remembered the old stories, tales of spirits that wandered near the forest at night, some kind and others hungry. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head, "Never follow the wind after dark, my child. The spirits call softly, pretending to be those you love." A shiver ran through her. She looked again toward the road home, now swallowed by shadows. Then she heard it, a whisper. Amina. Her name floated through the air like smoke, gentle but strange. She turned sharply, scanning the trees beyond the school fence, but saw nothing. The whisper came again, this time closer, and though every instinct told her to stay, something inside urged her to move. Slowly, she rose to her feet, clutching her satchel close to her chest. The world was silver, now under the moonlight, the trees tall and silent, like watchful giants. She took one step toward the road, then another, and soon the schoolyard disappeared behind her. The night air grew cooler, filled with the hum of unseen creatures, and the fireflies began to rise, hundreds of them, glowing softly, lighting the path ahead like tiny lanterns. Somewhere deep within the forest, the whisper turned into a song, sweet and haunting, and though she did not understand the words, her feet followed it. Far away, her parents argued by the fire, unaware that their carelessness had set their child upon a path that would lead her beyond the world of men and into the realm of spirits. The forest greeted Amina with a silence so deep it felt alive, as though every tree had paused to listen to her trembling footsteps. The moon, round and bright as polished bone, hung above the canopy. spilling silver light onto the narrow dirt path that twisted through the tall grass. Crickets chirped rhythmically, and somewhere far off a night bird let out a long, mournful cry. Amina's bare feet brushed over cool leaves, her small shadow stretching and shrinking as she moved. She had never walked this far from the school before, and though fear whispered in her chest, something stronger curiosity kept her going. Her grandmother used to tell her that spirits lived between the roots of old trees, speaking only to those who were lost. They guide the forgotten, she'd say, but only if the child's heart is brave enough to listen. Amina remembered those words now as a soft wind rose, carrying the faint scent of flowers and rain. Then she heard it again, her name, clear and soft as a sigh. She spun around, her eyes wide, but there was no one. Only the shimmering outlines of trees and the faint glow of fireflies drifting like fallen stars. "Who's there?" she called, her voice small in the vast darkness. No answer, only the rustle of grass, the whisper of wind, and then, again, her name. Amina. This time it came from ahead, deeper into the woods. Her heart pounded. Maybe, she thought, it was her mother calling. Maybe they had come looking for her. But deep down, she knew that voice did not belong to anyone she knew. Still, it was kind, almost tender, like the lullabies her grandmother used to hum. She stepped forward. The trees seemed to part, and a soft bluish mist began to curl around her ankles. It glowed faintly, lighting the way. Amina's fear began to fade. She followed the path as it curved through tall reeds and thick roots, the forest whispering secrets she couldn't understand. Shapes flickered at the edge of her sight, children, dancing, women with baskets. A tall figure with glowing eyes that vanished when she looked directly at it. The night air shimmered, heavy with unseen presence. Somewhere above, an owl hooted. Amina stopped. Her grandmother's stories came flooding back about the Njoka, the serpent spirit who guarded the forgotten, and the Ndoki, the restless souls who lured children away to the spirit world. Her chest tightened as the whisper returned, closer now, right beside her ear. "Do not be afraid, little one." She gasped and stumbled back, but there was no one there, only the flickering of fireflies forming strange shapes in the air. Then one firefly, brighter than the rest, began to move ahead, floating gently through the trees. It paused, as if waiting for her. Amina hesitated, clutching her satchel, then followed. The path sloped downward, leading to a small river that shimmered under the moonlight. The bright firefly hovered above it and then vanished. Amina knelt by the water's edge, staring at her reflection. For a moment, she thought she saw another face beside hers, a woman's face, gentle, smiling, eyes filled with light. "Who are you?" Amina whispered. The reflection shimmered, then disappeared as ripples broke the surface. The drums from the distant village faded away completely. Only the murmur of the river and the whisper of the trees remained. Amina stood up, realizing she was no longer just lost. She had crossed into a world where stories breathed, and the forgotten were remembered by something greater than man. As Amina followed the winding river deeper into the forest, the world around her seemed to change. The air grew cooler, heavier, as though every breath carried secrets older than time. The moonlight, once bright and gentle, dimmed beneath the thick canopy of ancient trees whose roots rose from the ground like the arms of sleeping giants. Amina felt their presence not just as trees, but as watchers, guardians of something hidden in the heart of the forest. The path ahead shimmered faintly, leading her to a wide clearing where the air was thick with mist. At its center stood a colossal stone statue of a woman, weathered and cracked by time. Moss covered her shoulders like a shawl, and vines curled around her arms. In her hands, she held a bowl filled with glowing blue water that reflected the moon above. Amina stood frozen. She had heard stories of this place in her grandmother's voice, the resting ground of the mother of the lost, the spirit who wept for abandoned children. She guards their dreams, her grandmother had said, and gathers their tears so they may never be forgotten. The girl stepped closer, her tiny feet sinking into the damp earth. As she reached the statue, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, making the leaves dance wildly. The air crackled with unseen power, and the surface of the glowing bowl rippled. Then, slowly, the statue's stone eyes began to shimmer with light. Amina gasped, stumbling back as a voice echoed around her, soft, deep, ancient. "Child of neglect, why do you walk alone between the worlds of man and spirit?" The voice was neither kind nor cruel. It was heavy with sorrow. "I was left," Amina whispered, her small voice. "They forgot me." The forest seemed to sigh. The blue light from the bowl grew brighter until it bathed her completely. And for a moment she saw visions, dozens of children wandering through the mist, their faces sad but peaceful. They were smiling at her, reaching out with hands that glowed like starlight. "Do not be afraid," the voice said again. "You are one of them now, and yet, not yet. The path before you is one of choice." The statue's eyes dimmed slightly as shadows gathered around its base, forming tall figures cloaked in smoke. They surrounded Amina, watching silently. Their eyes glowed faintly golden, like dying embers. "These are the forgotten ones," said the voice, "the spirits of those left behind by love. They walk the nights, guarding lost souls like yours." Amina's fear mixed with wonder. "Can I go home?" she asked softly. There was silence. Then the statue spoke again. "Home is where one is remembered. Do your parents remember you?" The question pierced her heart. She thought of her mother's laughter without her, her father's broken promises, the nights she slept alone as they fought. Her eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. The wind howled through the clearing, and the shadows stirred. "Then you belong here, for now," said the voice. "But every path has two ends. You may walk back to the world of forgetfulness, or stay among those who remember." Amina knelt before the statue, her tears mixing with the blue glow. "What if I stay?" she asked. "Then your story will never fade," the voice murmured. "But your world will no longer be your own." The fireflies rose around her, like stars reborn, spinning faster and faster until the clearing blazed with light. And as Amina closed her eyes, the forest seemed to whisper in unison, "She is chosen." The night deepened as Amina followed the faint glow of the blue mist that trailed away from the statue like a living river. The forest whispered behind her, voices soft as wind through reeds, guiding her toward a clearing where the air shimmered like heat. Before her stretched a wide, glimmering river, its surface silver under the moonlight, yet shifting like liquid glass. The river of choices, her grandmother had once mentioned in bedtime tales, was said to flow between the world of the living and the realm of spirits. No mortal eyes were meant to see it, unless the soul was marked by both worlds. Amina stepped closer, her reflection rippling in the glowing water only. It wasn't her reflection. In the mirror of the river, she saw two versions of herself, one dressed in her tattered school uniform, clutching her satchel, eyes full of longing. The other, dressed in white cloth like mist, glowing softly, her eyes calm and wise. The water spoke in murmurs, like hundreds of soft voices overlapping. Amina, child of memory and sorrow, your heart stands between paths. What will you choose? The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Amina felt tears on her cheeks, though she didn't remember crying. I don't understand, she whispered, staring at the twin reflections that seemed to move on their own. The living Amina stepped forward, reaching out for the other, while the glowing one shook her head slowly, as though warning her. The river stirred violently, its light brightening until it hurt her eyes. From the depths rose shadows, hands reaching out, faces of children she had seen in her vision near the statue. They surrounded her, their expressions kind but distant, their bodies shimmering like smoke. We are the forgotten, they said together, their voices echoing in the still night. We were once like you, waiting to be found, until we found ourselves here. Amina's breath came short. Can't you go home? She asked. A boy among them smiled sadly. Home is a word that only remembers those who are loved. His words struck her like lightning. Behind her, she heard faint voices calling her parents. No, it was only the wind playing cruel tricks. But in that sound, she felt something stir, a faint tug in her chest. For the first time, she thought maybe, just maybe, they would realize she was gone. The river brightened again, and two paths emerged from its waters. One led back toward the dark forest, the world she knew. The other glowed with a soft blue light, leading across the river into a land of endless mist. If you cross, you will be remembered forever, the voices whispered. If you turn back, you will be forgotten again. Amina closed her eyes, her heart torn. She thought of her grandmother's stories, of laughter under sunlight, of schoolmates' smiles, and of her mother's lullabies before they faded into neglect. Then she thought of the spirits, their peace, their warmth. Both worlds called to her. I don't want to be forgotten, she said finally, her voice trembling, but I don't want to stop being me. The river's surface stilled. The two reflections merged into one Amina, half light and half shadow. The wind hushed, and the trees bowed slightly, as though listening. Then you must walk the path between, the river said softly. You will be neither lost nor found, but remembered in the stories of those who listen. As she stepped back, the river rippled gently, glowing brighter until the forest vanished from sight. And when the wind carried her name through the trees again, it sounded not of fear, but destiny. Amina, the child who walked between worlds, had chosen her fate. The light of the river of choices faded behind Amina as she stepped into a world that seemed both strange and familiar. The air shimmered like a dream, and the ground beneath her feet glowed faintly with every step, as though the earth itself remembered her name. Around her stretched the spirit village, a place of quiet song and endless twilight. The huts were made not of clay or straw, but of woven light and mist, their walls breathing softly like living things. Children laughed somewhere in the distance, a sound so sweet it made Amina's heart ache. But these children were unlike any she had ever seen. Their skin shimmered with the glow of the moon, their eyes reflected the stars, and their laughter carried a haunting beauty, like the echo of a lullaby sung long ago. They ran through the air as easily as over the ground, leaving trails of light behind them. Amina followed the sound until she reached a wide courtyard where a fire burned, not red or orange, but blue, cool and gentle, flickering with the shapes of faces within its flames. Around the fire sat figures cloaked in silver dust. One of them, tall and regal, looked up as Amina approached. Her voice carried the calm of deep water. "Welcome, child of two worlds," she said. "We have waited for you." Amina bowed her head uncertainly. "What is this place?" The woman smiled faintly. "This is where stories rest when they are forgotten. Every child who was lost, every name unspoken, every tear unseen, they all find their way here, to be remembered by the winds and the stars." As she spoke, Amina noticed that each spirit child wore a pendant made of small glowing stones. One of them approached her, a boy with kind eyes. He placed a pendant around her neck. It felt warm, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. "Now you belong," he said. For the first time since she was left at school, Amina felt safe. Yet, deep within her, a shadow lingered, the thought of her parents, perhaps now realizing she was gone. "Do they ever come here?" she asked softly. The tall woman's smile faded. "The living do not walk these paths unless their love is strong enough to break the veil. But love, child, is a bridge seldom built by those who forget." The words settled heavily in Amina's heart. The other children gathered around her, laughing gently, pulling her toward the fire. They danced in circles, their voices rising into a song that had no language but filled the air with warmth. The fire's glow wrapped around them like the embrace of the earth itself. Amina closed her eyes and let herself be carried by the rhythm. She could feel their joy and sorrow, their longing and peace, all at once. And then, through the music, she heard a faint sound, distant but real, the voice of her mother, crying her name. It pierced the veil of this world like lightning. The song faltered. The spirits fell silent. The tall woman looked toward the horizon, where the mist began to tremble. "The living are calling you," she said softly. "Few are called back once they have stepped across. But your story is not finished." The blue fire flickered, and Amina's pendant glowed brighter, beating faster, as though her heart and her mother's were one. The spirit village shimmered, the children's laughter fading into whispers. Amina looked back one last time at the faces that smiled sadly at her, then turned toward the trembling light. "Remember us," the woman said. "Stories live when they are told." And then, with a deep breath, Amina stepped into the light that would lead her back to the world she once knew. The light that pulled Amina from the spirit village grew brighter and warmer with each step she took, and the air around her began to hum softly, like 1,000 voices whispering her name. She felt weightless, caught between the pull of two worlds, the peace of the spirits behind her and the sorrowful cry of her mother that echoed faintly ahead. Her glowing pendant pulsed faster, its rhythm syncing with her heartbeat. The mist parted to reveal a vast open plain under a sky split between night and dawn. One half shimmered with stars, the other bled with the orange glow of morning. In the center of that plain stood a single tritha tree of ecazits, silver leaves rustling like 1,000 sighs. Beneath it, Amina saw shadows forming, the outlines of her parents kneeling, their faces hidden by tears. Her heart leaped. She ran toward them, her feet barely touching the ground, the pendant glowing brighter with every step. But as she drew closer, she saw that her parents were not quite whole. Their forms flickered, made of mist and memory. "Mama, Baba," she cried, her voice breaking. Her mother's head lifted, her eyes wide with grief and guilt. "Amina, my child," she whispered, reaching out, but her hand passed through the air. "We forgot you," her father's voice said, trembling. "We thought you were safe." The wind carried his words like a wound through the dawn. Amina stopped, tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you come for me?" she asked, her voice small, breaking the silence of two worlds. Her parents fell to their knees, sobbing. "We searched too late," her mother said. "The night had already taken you." Behind Amina, the wind began to shift, and faint figures appeared, the spirit children of the village, standing in the mist, their eyes glowing softly. They watched her silently, the tall woman among them, speaking in a voice that trembled like leaves. "The world of men calls your name, Amina. Few are called back. Fewer still can hear both sides." Amina turned toward her parents again. Her pendant was now shining so bright that it hurt to look at it. She could feel two forces tugging at her, the warmth of her mother's voice and the cool calm of the spirit's song behind her. "Do you still want me?" she asked, her words trembling like wind. Her mother crawled forward, weeping. "More than life itself," she whispered. Her father lowered his head. "We will never forget again." The wind grew stronger, whipping through Amina's hair, as if time itself was breaking apart. The pendant lifted from her chest, spinning in the air, scattering blue sparks that filled the space between her and her parents. "Then remember her," said the spirit woman, her voice now distant but kind. "Let her name live on your lips, or she will be lost again." Amina felt her body grow lighter, her heartbeat slowing. The world tilted, half dream, half waking end. Then she took one step forward, through the light, into her mother's arms. A sound like thunder rolled across the plain, and the light exploded around them. The spirits faded back into the mist, their faces calm, smiling. When the world settled again, Amina lay wrapped in her mother's shawl beneath the same old baobab tree where it had all begun. The sun rose over Mbali, painting the world gold once more. Her parents wept, holding her close, whispering promises of love, of change, of memory. But as Amina opened her eyes, she saw a single glowing firefly resting on her palm, the last gift from the spirit village, and, deep in her heart, she knew she would always belong to both worlds. The morning light over Mbali broke like a promise renewed. The village stirred slowly, as though the earth itself had been holding its breath through the long night. From the old school at the edge of the plains came the sound of voices, soft, disbelieving gasps, as the villagers gathered around a small figure lying beneath the ancient baobab tree. Amina's eyelids fluttered open, and the golden sun poured over her face like a blessing. Her mother wept openly, her tears glistening like dew, while her father knelt beside her, whispering words of gratitude to the ancestors. No one could explain how she had returned. The elders said the forest spirits had shown mercy. The healer said the ancestors had sent her back to mend the chain of love broken by neglect. But Amina said nothing. She only held the glowing pendant tightly in her small hands. Its light was dim now, flickering softly like the last ember of a dying fire. Yet whenever the wind passed through the baobab branches, she could swear she heard faint laughter, the laughter of the children she had met beyond the veil. In the days that followed, Mbali changed. People who had once rushed through life, forgetting their loved ones and their promises, began to slow down. The story of Amina spread like wildfire, carried by traders and travelers, until it became a legend told beside every fire. Her parents, once careless and distant, now walked together every morning to the school gate, waiting for her even before the bell rang. Her mother would braid her hair with care and hum the same lullaby she used to sing when Amina was a baby, the one that had echoed faintly across the spirit plane. Her father, once too busy counting coins, now spent his days building benches beneath the baobab for children to rest, telling them, "Never let the ones you love feel forgotten." And though Amina smiled and laughed again, she often wandered to the river at dusk, where the light met the water and the mist began to rise. She would sit quietly, dipping her fingers into the current, and whisper, "Thank you," to the unseen world. One evening, as the stars began to bloom across the sky, she saw a flicker above the river, dozen tiny lights floating like fireflies. They swirled together, forming the shapes of the spirit children, their laughter drifting faintly on the wind. Amina's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "I remember," she whispered. The pendant on her neck glowed faintly, as if answering her. From that day, the people of Mbali began a yearly tradition. On the night when the moon hung low and silver, they gathered by the river, each carrying a small light. They sang songs of remembrance for those lost, forgotten, or wandering, and placed their lights on the water to drift into the unknown. They called it the Night of Echoes, and each year, when the river shimmered with 1,000 lights, Amina would stand at the edge, her pendant glowing softly, knowing the spirits were near. Time passed. Amina grew older, wiser, but she never forgot the spirit village, nor the lesson it had etched into her heart, that love must be guarded like a flame, for once forgotten, it can fade beyond reach. And sometimes, when the wind whispered through the baobab, she would still hear the voice of the tall woman saying, "Stories live when they are told." So Amina told her story again and again, ensuring it would never be lost, just as she had once been found. Years passed, and the winds over Mbali carried the whispers of time. The baobab tree grew older, its roots thicker and deeper, its branches now heavy with memory. Beneath it, the world had changed. Children ran and laughed where once only silence had lingered. Amina was no longer a child. She had become the village storyteller, her voice soft yet strong, carrying the rhythm of drums and rivers, the music of all that had come before. Every evening, when the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky melted into gold and violet, she sat by the fire, surrounded by eager faces, her glowing pendant resting against her heart. It had grown dim over the years, but it still pulsed faintly whenever she spoke of the spirit village. The children would lean in close, eyes wide, as she told them about the world beyond the valleyboat, laughter made of light, and a fire that burned blue, and a woman whose voice could calm storms. "And what happened to them, Mama Amina?" the youngest ones would always ask, their voices trembling with wonder. Amina would smile softly, her gaze lifting to the twilight sky. "They still watch us," she would say. "They live wherever love is remembered." One night, as she finished her story, a wind unlike any other swept through the village. It was gentle, yet carried the weight of something ancient. The fires flickered, the drums fell silent, and Amina's pendant began to glow brighter than it had in years. She felt her heart stir, a familiar warmth blooming in her chest. The children gasped as the pendant rose from her neck, hovering before her eyes. "It's time," a voice whispered, soft like the rustle of the baobab leaves. Amina stood slowly, her eyes reflecting the shimmer of the pendant. Beyond the trees, the river glowed faintly, its surface alive with hundreds of lights, the spirits, fireflies, returning once more. The villagers followed as Amina walked toward the water, the pendant guiding her steps. At the riverbank, she turned and smiled at them, her face serene. "Do not weep," she said softly. "The world remembers when we do." She stepped into the water, her reflection merging with the glow. The pendant's light spread, illuminating the entire river, and in that brilliance, the shapes of the spirit children appeared, laughing, dancing, calling her name. The tall woman from the spirit village stood among them, her eyes kind and proud. "You have kept the story alive," she said. "Now rest among those who never forget." Amina smiled through tears, whispering, "Thank you for bringing me home twice." The light enveloped her completely, and when it faded, the river was calm once more. In her place floated a single glowing pendant, its light dimming slowly until it settled deep into the water, where it shimmered like a star beneath the surface. The villagers wept, yet their tears were not of sorrow, but of reverence. They built a shrine beside the baobab, where they told Amina's stories to every new generation. Each year, on the night of echoes, they placed their lights on the river, watching them drift away, whispering her name so it would never be forgotten. And sometimes, on still nights, when the moonlight touched the water just right, the villagers swore they could see her reflection, smiling back at them, her eyes bright, her laughter carried softly by the wind. For in Mbali, it was said that as long as the stories were told, Amina and the spirit village would live forever between the light of the living and the love of the lost.